Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam, and I'm on a quest to be the most prolific reviewer of all time. And today I'm going to start to review Babylon 5. I just finished a rewatch of the first season, and I have so many thoughts about it because I realized that Babylon 5, at least in my experience, is the best science fiction series ever. And it's had such a huge impact on my life that I didn't even realize. And I think the reason for that is it's an incredibly well written and well acted show. And that's the first part. And the second part, in a more personal note, is when I was growing up, this is going to sound really weird for my younger viewers, but when I was growing up, we didn't have cable, and there was only like three channels, maybe like five channels optimistically, that you could get on our antenna because we lived in the middle of the countryside. So the channels that we could get, they didn't play like super famous shows like Star Trek. They played the original series in syndication, and my dad watched it, and I watched it, and he loved it, and I liked it. And so they didn't play like new Trek, not new Trek like NU, but like I mean Trek like the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise. We didn't get any of that stuff, right? We got the original series of Star Trek, maybe some Doctor Who occasionally, and Babylon 5 for some reason, because Babylon 5, I think, it wasn't as successful as those other ones, so it was cheaper to syndicate to those stations, so they bought it. So I watched a lot of Babylon 5, and unfortunately, so Babylon 5 is very unique at the time for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that it was the first show that had like an overarching plot. It was a story told in 5 seasons. And when they syndicated it, they would play shows out of order. So you had to like think about what actually was going on in the story. So it was difficult. So I think they didn't actually do the whole run of 5 seasons. So I know what happens in the show, but I've never actually watched the whole thing, I think. I've watched like the first 3 seasons probably. So that was the first unique part about it. The second unique part about it was that it was the first show to use CGI for its special effects. And some people say that it's dated. I think that it's charming. It feels like cutscenes from a 1990s video game. And it's charming, but also a little sad, if that makes any sense. Um, there's kind of a feeling of emptiness there, which works well for the story, actually. Um, yeah, so the CGI effects, they do get better in other seasons, but right now I'm going to focus on season 1. And then in later, I'm going to put like a whole video together because I'm going to try and make this video like the longest on my channel, and I'm going to put a lot of effort into it. So yeah, I'm going to review seasons 2, 3, 4, and 5 also. So this is going to focus on season 1. So the special effects do get better in later seasons, but in the beginning, it's just sort of there. And as I said, kind of feeling of emptiness. And it's interesting to see the evolution of the series, because what happened is that the actor who played Captain Sinclair, so Michael O'Hara or Michael O'Hare, he played a character named Captain Jeffrey Sinclair. And he was the commander of Babylon 5. Now, Babylon 5, I didn't even tell you what the story is about. So, Babylon 5 is basically this space station which is being used as a point of diplomacy between these major races and unaligned races in the far future. Maybe not far future, it's like 200 years in the future. So the races are the Minbari, the Centauri, the Narn, humans, the Vorlons, and non-aligned worlds, which includes like a lot of different cultures. And Sinclair, he has been appointed as the leader of this Babylon 5. And weirdly, there has been 4 other Babylon stations with the same idea, but they all kind of had different catastrophes. They blew up or something didn't work. And so Sinclair has been appointed as the leader of Babylon 5, and that's because he holds this kind of unique position in Earth Minbari relations. So, to backtrack a little bit, there was a big war between the Minbari and the Earth Alliance. It says Earth Alliance, but basically it's just humans. And they have like a colony on Mars, and they've kind of colonized their own solar system, and they have jump gate technology, which the Centauri gave them. But anyway, they go out forth, and they get into a conflict with this minor race, and they defeat them militarily. So this gives them a lot of confidence. And when they meet the Minbari, this doesn't happen. It's not explained why the war starts in season 1, so I'm not going to tell you, but basically there's a war that starts, and the humans in the beginning are like really, really confident, but it's kind of like an effing around and finding out moment for them, because they're like really, really confident, but the Minbari are like one of the most technologically advanced species out there. And so they it's like kind of ants attacking a person. So the humans are like trying to fight this war that they started, but the Minbari are like really angry because the humans killed one of their main leaders, and they get to the point where they're at Earth basically, and there's like this last stand of humans against the Minbari, and the Minbari are led by a group called the Grey Council, which are basically these priests. And Delenn, who is a major character in Babylon 5, is one of the members of this Grey Council. And she advises that they should, like, why are the humans still fighting, basically? Before they attack the actual Earth, they should, speak to some humans. So they kidnap Jeffrey Sinclair, who is at this last ditch battle of the line, and he is like basically doing a kamikaze mission against the Minbari. And the kamikaze mission, of course, doesn't work very well, but he gets his little fighter craft gets, vanished, and he is interrogated, he's tortured, and we don't find out why exactly the Minbari stop, but like the Minbari are on the point of genocide against humans, and they interview Jeffrey Sinclair and they surrender, which causes a lot of problems. So basically they're on the point of the human race no longer existing, and then the Minbari surrender. So this is when Babylon 5's story starts. Like, nobody understands why they did that. And it is explained in later seasons, but I'm not going to tell you that now because I want to keep you in suspense. So this guy, Jeffrey Sinclair, he is the one who had been tortured and interrogated, and he gets sent back to Earth, but he doesn't remember anything. And the Minbari choose him to be the leader of the station. So the first season is all about like Sinclair trying to like navigate his way around like the politics between Earth and the Minbari and the Centauri and the Narn. And there's so many things to say about it. It's wonderful. But maybe I should let the cat out of the bag a little bit here and tell you that Sinclair is not going to be playing a major part later in the series. And that is because he actually resigned due to mental health issues after the first season. And the creator of Babylon 5, whose name is J. Michael Straczynski. So J. Michael Straczynski, he was the one who like wrote most of the episodes and created the whole idea of Babylon 5. So he was put in this difficult position because Michael O'Hare, the actor who played Jeffrey Sinclair, he had like this mental breakdown basically, not connected to the show necessarily. He struggled with mental issues all of his life. And he basically said to Straczynski that he couldn't continue with the show. And Straczynski was like, okay, we'll wait until you get better and then we'll continue with the show. And O'Hare was prescient enough to say like, no, if you do that, it will like kill the momentum of the show. You need to like do something with my character. So they wrote Sinclair out, but he's still, well, I said that he's not a major part of Babylon 5 after, but he is, but he's not like there day to day. But we'll talk about that when we get to season 2. So the great part about Babylon 5 is that it's this mixture of kind of like deep character studies of these like fascinating characters like Jakar and Londo and Delenn and Sinclair and Garibaldi and Ivonova, and also these high kind of sci-fi concepts. There's not a lot of technobabble like there is in Star Trek in this series. And like clearly Babylon 5 wouldn't have existed without Star Trek, but it goes very far beyond it. And I think it's weird because Star Trek creators, maybe this was kind of like one of those situations where two people come up with the same idea at the same time, or maybe it was more like Babylon 5 was an inspiration for this. But I think Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, is much more famous than Babylon 5 is, and it came out at around the same time. And it's superior Star Trek for sure. It's really, really good. But Babylon 5 is better. And why is it better? It's better in my opinion because it's weirdly more realistic, both in terms of storytelling and character development. Like the humans are not this like overpowering force that can, stand toe to toe with the biggest threats in the universe. They're this like tiny, weak race that kind of stumbled into greatness, basically. And the other species are kind of like fascinated by them. Like, how did you get here? What are you doing here? Sort of thing. And the show really reflects that kind of incompetence, I want to say, and luck. And there's also, it gets more built upon as the seasons go by. But there's also this feeling of intense trauma, that these wars that are fought in space are not just things that people forget. Like Jakar and the Narn have this trauma. Even the Centauri, who were oppressing the Narn for many years, they have this trauma, the trauma of the oppressors. So, and where I think the Deep Space Nine did that motif better with the Cardassians. Weird name now, but like there was a race of aliens called the Cardassians, and they occupied this world called Bajor, which is next to this wormhole in Deep Space Nine mythology. So they did that better because. So why did they do it better? Because the story was more fleshed out. And in this Babylon 5's telling, you don't really see from the Narn perspective so much, or even the Centauri perspective. You see it from the human perspective. So it's kind of like if you had two people fighting in that doorway over there, and I'm talking here. So that's how the humans perceive this conflict between the Narns and the Centauri. And it gets overshadowed, that's kind of a play on words, by something called the Shadow Wars, which will start in season 2. Yeah, but I really like the whole like aspect that the humans are kind of stumbling around and they're trying to find their place in the universe, and they're not doing a very good job of it, honestly. It's really, really good. And there is this tension between Earth and its colonies, and Babylon 5 kind of sits at this intersection between like Earth and the colonial problems. And so, Earth is trying to be this big empire, this force in the universe, and it's also struggling with the fact that there is a lot of internal conflict. And that's another great thing, too, about the series, is that the politics are very, very realistic. There's politics on Minbar, which is the Minbari homeworld. There's politics on Earth. There's politics in the Centauri. And you can kind of see these conflicts are sort of, they take inspiration from real life things. And I haven't really talked about the alien races so much, but let's focus on the ones that we kind of get a lot of information about in season 1. So you have the Narn, and the Narn are these sort of like reptile creatures. They're represented by Ambassador Jakar, and their planet was colonized brutally for about 100 years by the Centauri. And it kind of feels like the parallels in human history would be India and the British Empire. And so the Narns are now independent, and they're very kind of materialistic, and they are kind of doing to other people what the Centauri were doing to them. So it also has analogies to, Israel and the creation of that state, and how the trauma that was inflicted upon Jewish people is now kind of institutionalized and inflicted upon other people. So it's really, really deep, right? I think the actor who plays Jakar, let me find him. No, that's not. He has he has a Lithuanian name. Andreas Katsoulas. So he played Jakar, and he does like a really good job. And I think like the character, you can tell that he is important to the story of Babylon 5. But I also think that the prosthetics probably were really difficult because he doesn't get as much screen time as somebody like Londo, who I'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, because like he looks reptilian, his skull shape is very weird, he's got like spots. So it's a very good portrayal of what an alien would look like. And I think Babylon 5 has gotten some criticism about their depiction of alien races, especially the Minbari and the Centauri, because the Minbari kind of just look like normal people, but they have this weird skull protrusion. And the Centauri look like people, but they have weird hair, which is connected to their social structure. And they have a lot of appendages, which, I mean, they look human, but they're deeply unhuman. And maybe we'll talk about the Centauri right now. So the Centauri, as I mentioned, are kind of this analog to the Roman Empire or the British Empire. They have like this very ornate culture where status is everything. And it's human, but not human. And in fact, they are the first race that makes contact with the humans. And they tell them when they meet that they're long lost brothers or something. But as I said, they have like 8 things which are sexual reproduction organs, so they're not exactly like humans. And they're represented on the station by Ambassador Londo Mollari. And I'll talk about more about him in a second. But also what I've done is I have these quotes that each of these characters says in season 1 that I think reflect something about the series. So I'm probably going to get the actual video together and just like splice it into this video and then talk about what they said. But I have quotes from Lando, quotes from the kind of head of, not security, but she's the second in command of Babylon 5, Susan Ivonova. And then Delenn, who is the Minbari ambassador. And Captain Sinclair. All right, so let's begin with Lando. So Lando is this kind of very complicated figure. He's this guy he's kind of a Shakespearean character, actually. He's full of life, kind of like Falstaff, but like with a deep sense of sadness and emptiness to him, because he's this sort of like, he loves life, he loves women, he loves gambling, he loves excess, but he also really cares about status, as a Centauri does, and he wants to reclaim the status of the great Centauri Republic. So these are some quotes from him. There comes a time when you look into the mirror and you realize that what you see is all that you will ever be. Then you accept it, or you kill yourself, or you stop looking into mirrors. Like, how profound is that, right? Like, he's quite aware of what kind of person he is, or what kind of alien he is, I guess. I don't know if we say person for aliens. Interesting question. But yeah, he is quite aware of the kind of character that he has. And the next one is connected to that one. We Centauri live our lives for appearances, position, status, title. These are the things by which we define ourselves. But when I look beneath the mask I'm forced to wear, I see only emptiness. So, like at the end of the British Empire, it's a real paper tiger, the Centauri Republic. So the British Empire before the First World War, everyone was like, this is like, they're a behemoth. They control India. They control most of Africa. They control the waves. But the First World War kind of really put the lie to it, because war had evolved over time, and it wasn't just about, having the biggest battleships. It was about having the best tactics. And that war really destroyed the British Empire, but the British Empire lived on for like 40 more years. And and it was something that could like damage you. So, Nazi Germany found that out. Like it was still dangerous enough to rip your throat out, but kind of dying in the process. And that's what the Centauri Republic is in season one. It's kind of failing. It's corrupt. It's empty. It's just full of like this status and this kind of social play. But it's still very, very dangerous. Kind of empty, but dangerous, which is what that quote reflects. And so the last quote from season one that I wanted to share with you from Malari is, I need to tell you the story of the episode. So there's this couple. So everybody on Centauri Prime, they get married because of social position, and they're forced into these marriages at a very early age. And Londo personally, he has 3 wives that he despises in different ways, and vice versa. And that will become a plot point in season 2. But right now, what happens is there's these 2 young people, maybe they're like 16, 17, and they escape to Babylon 5, and they want to elope and get married because they've both been betrothed to different people. And as they are Centauri, Malari has to kind of work this way. He has to kind of figure this situation out, and his first instinct is just to send them back to get married. But eventually he says this quote. Well, he quotes his father. His father said, "My shoes are too tight, but it doesn't matter because I have forgotten how to dance." Like, what a powerful line that is. Like, basically, the weight of society is so oppressing on these people that dancing, like, for all the Centauri are like fans of like excess and luxury and like showing off, it's hollow because it's not based on real feeling. And Malari, he's quoting his father, but he also feels like he's in this position. And he's a complicated character because sometimes he does things which are really good for like people, and sometimes he does really horrible things, which we'll talk about in season 2. But in this case, he sends them off to live with a rich and powerful family where they will learn the ways of the Centauri, and then they will be able to choose who they want to get married to when they are adults, because they'll be adopted into this family. Okay, the next character I'd like to talk about is Susan Ivonova, and she is the second in command on Babylon 5, and she starts in season 1, and she continues, I think, for 5 seasons of Babylon 5. So each season is about a year in the time of the story. She is Russian, and she's Jewish, and one of the criticisms of any science fiction is you have like the alien cultures are always like monoliths, and it is kind of true in Babylon 5. So you have like all of the cultural diversity of humans, but the other aliens are basically like one thing, one or two things, and they're not as complicated culturally and religiously as humans are. And maybe that's because actually these aliens, their religions are based on the things that actually have happened in the universe. and humans are more creative. I don't know, but anyway. So she's Jewish, and she has a complicated life with her father because, and this is another aspect of this story, that humans are able to be telepaths, and they've developed this kind of way of training telepaths. And Ivonova's mother, so basically you have a choice of joining the Psi Corps or renouncing the Psi Corps and taking this medicine to diminish your psychic abilities, but your telepathic abilities. And so Ivonova's mother does this, but she reacts badly to the drugs and she commits suicide eventually. So Ivonova is left with her father, and her father is maybe not the most understanding of individuals, but she's like a very unique character. So she's kind of like this tough but really sensitive person, and I think two quotes really sum her up. So there's this situation where this alien comes, and I don't remember exact details, but he wants to get someone who's on the ship on Babylon 5, and his ship is like really, really powerful, could destroy Babylon 5. So Ivonova says to him, Vakarashok, our gun arrays are now fixed on your ship and will fire the instant you come into range. You will find their power quite impressive for a few seconds. So basically, people have interpreted that quote as being very, hardcore, like Ivonova, badass. But actually, it's not badass at all. It's just a matter of fact. Because basically, Babylon 5 can't compete with this ship. So they'll try. They will try to defend themselves, but I think it's a more fatalistic sentence than a badass sentence. And I think that Ivonova is the epitome of fatalism in this show. And it's great that they used a Russian character, because Eastern Europeans are pretty fatalistic, which sometimes is useful in life. And there's another quote where she says something like, there will be a boom tomorrow, not today. Somebody needs to have perspective about the inevitability of a boom. Ambassador, there's a boom happening right now. So, so basically what happens, so as I said, all Babylon 5's previous stations, like Babylon 1 to 4, have blown up, and she's just basically saying there's going to be some catastrophe sometime and we need to be aware of that. But it's kind of strange because you have this balance between hope and fatalism. And speaking of hope, I think the character that best represents hope is Delenn. So Delenn is the Minbari ambassador for, and in the first season she plays this sort of like kind of a Spock-like character, and I think that the Minbari share a lot of characteristics with the Vulcans in that they have like this rigid belief structure. And okay, the Vulcans are super hypocritical about that belief structure too, but the Vulcans have a biology that they're fighting against, right? And their biology makes them super irrational sometimes. And I think with the Minbari, it's not like that they have these biological urges every so often and they need to control them. It's like they couch their sort of vindictiveness in this sort of cultural baggage, spiritual baggage, right? So it's a bit hypocritical, but there are some interesting things about it. And I think that when I read the quotes to you, you're going to say, like, it's cliche and, like it's very woo woo kind of stuff. But it wasn't really like that in 1994. Like, these were kind of opinions that kind of were maybe not shocking, but unusual for the majority of the population in North America to hear. So she says, the first one, the third principle of sentient life is the capacity for self-sacrifice, the conscious ability to override evolution and self-preservation for a cause, a friend, a loved one. So that's the first, that's one of their like principles. And it kind of makes sense. And that's not something that's very, very unique, I guess. It's like a very, it's a science, it's a rationalized view of a spiritual point of view, I guess it makes sense. But the next one is something that personally I think is true. She says, we are stardust, we are the universe manifest trying to figure itself out. And it's one of those things that you hear when you're a kid, and I think that I internalized it, but I didn't really like pay much attention to it, because I really think that like spirituality is always like a very difficult thing to talk about. And I wouldn't say that I'm a traditional guy when it comes to spirituality, but I would say I think that who knows if religions are true, but if we strip away the religious sort of explanation of the world, and we just look at the point of view of the universe, like, okay, maybe I'm not explaining myself very clearly. Let me try again. So, the universe is a thing in which we exist, right? And the universe has like a series of physical rules that inform how the universe actually functions. And so those are things like the laws of physics, laws of evolution, things like that. And the universe is kind of like this machine that's trying to understand itself. And the way that it understands itself is sentient life. Like people like you and me that can ask ourselves like these questions, like why are we here? We can actually observe the universe and we can interpret it and experience the universe for itself because we are part of the universe. And I think that's what Delenn is trying to say. So, and a tree, as far as we know, trees can't do that. And other animals, they have different levels of sentience, so they can do it to a certain extent. But we can like rationalize it, we can think about it, we can understand the rules of the universe, we can go out, we can explore, we can experience new things. And I think for me that's been a very sort of inspirational idea, motivational idea, that we are here for a short time and our experiences are actually the universe understanding a bit about itself, right? And the universe actually experiencing itself. So if I see like a great movie or I have a good time with my friends or my kids, the universe, it's like a feedback loop for the universe, I think. And I think that's what the Minbari ultimately are trying to say. But as I said, sometimes it's a bit hypocritical and caught up with vengeance and religious conservatism. Yeah, so that has been my review of the first season of Babylon 5, and I have a lot more to say about it. So I will say a lot more about it, but I'll come back to this. I'll come back to Babylon 5 after season 2. All right. Bye-bye.